started. It's a couple of minutes after the hour, and we have a number of attendees that have shown up. My name is Steve Brugger. I am the president of Oxford Computer Group North America, and I'm here today to introduce Mark Riley, who I have worked with for quite a while, all the way back into the 90s when we were deploying Microsoft's first forays into X.400, X.500 based email systems. We'd send Mark all around the world to implement those things, and he's stuck with it through the rollout of Exchange and then on through the rollout of identity management, and continues to evolve both his technical chops and the breadth of his skill set with every new product release, it seems, that Microsoft comes out with. But before we get started with the presentation, a little bit of housekeeping and a brief advertisement. So Mark, if you could advance to the next slide. Thank you. So Oxford Computer Group has a full gamut of services. We have been training on identity management since the release of Microsoft's first identity management services in 2003. We've trained more people than anyone else on identity management, and that's throughout the world. And we continue to evolve our education offering. The bulk of our services, however, are on consulting and systems integration. And today we work across the United States and Europe with envisioning engagements that help customers to build a case for development urgency. And we also do large-scale implementations primarily for enterprise-level clients. Mark, if you'd advance to the next slide. Wanted to point out a couple of our upcoming webinars. The first one is a customer case study. We've done some work with a large real estate company using Microsoft's Identity Management, their MIM product, and Enterprise Mobility Suite to provide email application access and self-service password reset to a very large number of their employees and affiliates. We think of Forefront Identity Management as an on-prem solution, but when you're using MIM, you'll see how well it spans both on-prem and cloud to enable the services that are contained within the Enterprise Mobility Suite. That's going to be a really good case study. We're looking forward to presenting that one. The next webinar that we've got coming up is our next engagement on Privileged Access Management with MIM. Our first MIM webinar last month had a very large number of attendees, and we expect the interest in this one to be just as big. And then following that, we will be talking about our new course offerings. We'll be releasing MIM courses later this year, and we'll give you a brief look at what those new courses are going to look like. The next FIM training engagements, we are running an A520 course on June 2nd. We are running the FIM R2 Expert course on July 14th. And as we roll out the new MIM courses, we'll be announcing those dates as well in the fall time frame. Next slide. Today's agenda. Mark's going to be talking about Azure Active Directory dynamic groups, and most of the presentation will be about the new features in Intune, managed apps, application policies, and conditional access. Where possible, he'll be demonstrating some of these new features. That's not going to be the case for everything, but I think you'll find it very engaging presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to use the question box in the GoToWebinar interface. We'll try to answer as many as we can through the presentation, but for the most part, we'll be answering questions at the end. So without any further ado, I'll let Mark take over.
Thanks, Steve. As Steve said, I'm Mark Riley, architect with Oxford Computer Group, or OCG as we call ourselves inside. Yeah, we want to start talking. I wanted to talk about dynamic groups. Plays a really nice role in System Center and Intune, particularly for licensing. One of the issues we have is managing all of the licenses depending upon how you're licensing Intune, whether it comes from Intune license or an EMS license. The dynamic groups, or any groups really, provide a great way to manage licenses. The dynamic groups give us more capabilities to do things in the cloud. We can drive all of these with, of course, with identity management in our on-prem, and then sync those attributes up. Dynamic groups are really driven by the attributes that a user has, not things such as group membership, but department or other attributes that you might choose. Location could make decisions on licensing. We have things that we need to do in the cloud based on location as well, so we could drive group membership based on that and key off of those. The dynamic groups currently still in preview, but wanted to talk about it because it is a nice piece and as I said, an excellent way to provide for the licensing of these cloud services. So let's take a look at them. I'm in my Azure console. You can see this is my personal account. You'll see M. Riley all over the place. I'm really the only one that runs this stuff. But in the Azure portal, you see, of course, we have a list of all of the various items that are available. And, of course, under Active Directory, I have my directory. This directory is syncing with my cloud, and I didn't look at it earlier today to make sure it was currently syncing, but yeah, 2 hours ago, so everything's running fine on that. I was thinking about doing a sync with a user with an attribute, but you've probably all seen syncs before. If you haven't, we can certainly dig into that at some other point. But you can see here, of course, I've got my users. This is the same view I would have in O365. It's the same view I would see of my users if I go in through Intune and go to the account portal here, the same users. This is just the view through Azure, because that's where I can do the dynamic group management. But you'll see the group that I'm working with will show up here. So of course you could use it in Intune as well as Azure O365 across the whole suite, because we share the directory, of course. So here are my users. You see the users have come up. My groups have also come up from my on-prem instance, and I also have some groups that have been created here in Azure. The first thing to enable dynamic groups is, of course, it needs to be Active Directory Premium, which if you purchase your Azure subscription through EMS, then that includes Active Directory Premium, and so that just comes right along. And that's how we see most people licensing Intune, so you end up getting ADP in with it, and so that comes. So down here under groups, under my group management, this delegated group management enabled is what's required to allow you to do the dynamic groups, and then the rest of it you just manage from within the groups. So I've already set up a group that is set for dynamic management, and it's called my Intune licensing group. You can see it's got a ton of users in it. I just recently changed the method that I was doing the dynamic entry for it, and the dynamic settings are done through the configure. You can see here I've enabled dynamic membership and a little preview that indicates that this still is in preview. All that means is that this is not final. The UI might change in the future, and the feature could potentially go away if it doesn't work as expected or people don't care for it. The whole Azure concept is very flexible, very user-driven, and a lot of feedback will drive how these things end up. There are two ways that I can manage these dynamic group memberships. I can specify basic rules, where in this case I simply pick from the attributes that are available. I choose the attribute that I want, and then I select a condition for that. Equals, not equals, contains, starts with, a match, not match. And in this case I just put in the UPN of the accounts that I actually want to use in Azure. So I have a different domain name for inside my domain, and this is simply the users that access services using this UPN, so I'm able to set those users up. I also can do an advanced rule, and you see here it just pulls that rule down for me and populates the advanced rule with that. So there's actually no change here. But what I do is if I can, I'm going to change this group back. Well, I better not do it now because I am setting licensing on this. I'm going to leave that alone. But the advanced rule allows you to combine these rules is the biggest thing here. So let me get this out of the way and take a look at those advanced rules. So you can see here that we've taken essentially the same language for evaluating these rules that showed up in the advanced rule, but we're able to combine these. So instead of simply saying a user is in sales, I could say a user is in sales or in marketing, or I could say that a user is in sales and not an SDE. So I can combine these in ands and ors and nots to get exactly who I want in these groups. These groups are evaluated very frequently, not instantaneously, but very frequently. Most of the time, by the time you set up the dynamic group and you turn around to use it, it has populated with the proper groups. As users are synced and their attributes are updated, those are reevaluated and the group membership is updated. As I said, this can be used to provide licensing, so this is a great way to provide the service that your users need without extra spend for services that you don't. It's always a bit of an issue to make sure you deprovision people as well as provisioning them, and with allowing for attributes for group membership is a really powerful way, I think, to manage that. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the dynamic groups out there and that you give those a try. The big piece that we wanted to talk about today was the managed apps for mobile devices that Microsoft has released. These applications are the Office apps, the productivity apps, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel. I believe OneDrive can be managed. There are also applications, additional applications, including a managed browser, so that any links that come across in managed email or managed documents are opened in a managed browser. That managed browser can have whitelisted and blacklisted URLs as well. There are also additional applications coming for managing secure PDFs, for containerizing, managing image viewer and MP4s, some videos as well. There's more of those actually on Android at the moment than on iOS. And Microsoft has not announced their managed application strategy for Windows, but I'm sure that is around Windows 10 and will probably be announced at Ignite in the beginning of next month. So we're looking forward to that and updates to this. We also have Microsoft is going to release an SDK which will allow third parties to participate in this concept. So Brad Anderson, the VP of Microsoft, has spoken about the concept behind this, and this is containerization by policy. So what happens is these applications have rules, and when they understand the rules, we consider those applications to be enlightened. Microsoft uses that term in a number of places. Enlightened applications also for RMS, rights management services, applications that understand that are enlightened applications, and in the same way, applications that third parties use Microsoft's available SDK to create their applications in an enlightened format. So Box can create, and I believe they have announced that they're creating a policy managed version that will be able to distribute to applications and manage the use of that application. As I said, these are available for iOS and Android, and they're installed through Intune. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. There are a couple of pieces around the, go ahead and get rid of that, leave that up there. A couple of pieces around the apps. The first thing that needs to be done for the apps is creating the application policy that actually drives these managed applications and governs what they can do on the devices. So these are located in our configuration policies in Intune. And you see that I have a configuration, a mobile application management policy for Android and a mobile application policy for iOS. I'm just going to focus on iOS today. We'll do an install from iOS. I have my iPad up with an Air server, so we can take a look at that and see how it all runs. So we'll just take a look at the policy here. This is the default policy. When I create one, Microsoft has a default policy that will just populate for me and allow me to use it, and that's what I've selected here. So this is the default policy. We'll go through the different capabilities here. This app web content is, I said that there is a managed browser. This allows us to require that any content opened from an application managed by this mobile application policy will be opened in a managed browser. If the managed browser isn't available, then that won't be used. I lost my Air server. That'll come back. Data, and then the effort we're working on here in data relocation is really data protection. So we want to prevent, but in most cases we're going to prevent iTunes and iCloud backup. But if you want to provide that, then of course you can change that. Allow app to transfer data to other apps. These two little pieces are a little confusing here. This app to transfer data to other apps allows me to launch and send data to other apps using URLs. So this is the ability to transfer data to another app through what is called deep linking in many cases. And this allows us to call any other app and pass data off to it as long as it's another policy managed app. I can also say this can go to any app. If I want to allow that data out to any app on the OS and open it up, I can do that. But again, the recommended setting is policy managed apps, because we're creating this container where we're sharing information and limiting the information getting in or out of that container. In most cases, we don't care too much about bringing information in. If you've got something that you're pulling from a website or some other resource that you want to put in a document that's an enterprise document, probably a good idea to allow that. So receiving data from other apps is any app, although I can restrict that if I want to. And then we have the opportunity to prevent save as within the application. And probably the most powerful is the ability to restrict cut, copy, and paste with other applications. And we have the same type of settings here, blocked. We can work with policy managed apps and policy managed apps with paste in. Just allows me to bring those in from other applications, or I can allow any app, which of course is almost like not having these policies at all. So that controls the data that we can move in and out of the application, and I'll demo that to you in a minute. This cut, copy, and paste is really kind of slick. I wasn't clear how it worked before, but what they do is they actually encrypt the data on the clipboard, and so when you take it to another application that hasn't been enlightened, that application can't see the data, so it doesn't even think there's anything on the clipboard, so it doesn't offer the ability to paste. So it's really quite a slick way that all of the other applications that we don't want to work with don't have to be modified in any way or have anything done. It's done through kind of a negative policy. And then I can control access to the application. So by requiring a simple PIN for access, this just requires that I have another step to get into these applications. Some people may find it a little onerous, but this is kind of for the occasion where you might hand your device off to somebody to do something briefly. You don't want them opening up your sensitive documents in Word, so you just have a quick PIN. It's a simple PIN. It can be 1111, as you'll see online. If someone is working on trying to get into it and they try and brute force your PIN, I have 5 attempts set, which again is the default, that will require a PIN reset, and when that occurs, you'll have to authenticate again. So if if a child's trying to get into your Word and they try too many times, then you'll be presented with a logon and have to reset the PIN. You can even go as far as requiring corporate credentials for access. I'm happy that I do not have that set on. And that just asks you to authenticate every time you open the app within this time frame, and then require device compliance. So if my device falls out of compliance, is jailbroken or rooted, or I don't have a PIN on it, or I've turned off encryption, or any of the things that I say are compliance in Intune, if that device falls out of compliance, then we'll disallow access to Word. This is very similar to the conditional access we'll talk about in a little bit that restricts access to online resources based on your compliance with corporate policy. And so this says we do require it. It's just a simple binary yes or no. And then we check the access requirements after a period of time. So after 30 minutes, if you can open and close Word or resume Word or Excel or any of these managed apps for 30 minutes. After that, you'll be required. It'll recheck the access requirements, and if you open a new copy of Word, it'll ask for the PIN again. You do get a grace period if the device is offline, so you can't. So we can't check compliance, and that is set to 720 minutes by default, which is, if I'm correct, about half a day or something. And then with the last policy here is to encrypt the app data, and you can see the choices there when it's locked, except when the files after a restart, or use device settings. And in most cases, we just require encryption of the entire device anyway, so that's not a big thing. So that's our policy for the application. When we're setting up Microsoft applications, these managed apps from the store, we just go find those in the store or in the, I know I did a search for this earlier today, find OneNote in the App Store and find the iTunes link for that, copy out that link. I don't know if I have the icon for this, but we'll fake it if I don't. And from Intune, I add that app. So you can see here are my applications that I have, and you can see some of them are indicated as a managed iOS app from the App Store. So there's Excel and Word. I have Word on there. I put Word in from Google Play as well, and a couple of Microsoft apps in there as well. So when I select to add an application, it's going to start up this other little app that's disappeared onto one of my other screens and require me to log in. And as you can see, I'm using ADFS here, so I'll log in with my ADFS server, which apparently I don't know the password to. There we go. And I have multi-factor authentication, so it'll take just a moment while it calls my phone. And I will answer that and respond as soon as it does. I should turn this off. Actually, I did have it cached for 30 minutes, so it allowed me in without the call. So this is the software publisher. When I publish software, I'm able to choose whether it's an installer, because remember, Intune can manage PCs, so this can be a PC installation. It could be an XE or an MSI that I'm installing. Or we can choose these external links, which is how we set up something from the Play Store or any free app or any app really, from the iOS store or the Windows store. I can paste in the URL here and we'll create a deep link to that app and run that out. But for iOS apps, for managed iOS apps, we specify the URL for the application. And I don't know if you noticed, but over here these choices changed because it recognized that this is a managed app from the store, and so I'll have some additional options. We go ahead and select that, and we chose OneNote, didn't we? We did. Oh, except OneNote's not the publisher. Microsoft OneNote. This this will actually, I've heard that this will be changing a bit, that we'll get a way that involves a bit less typing to create these applications. And OneNote, we'll just put that in there. We need something in this field. I can choose the category for it. I'm going to feature this application, and I'm going to put it in business, and I'll feature it, and then assign the icon that'll show up for this application. And I have OneNote. Do I have a OneNote one? Oh, good, I don't. That means I can get to use my favorite logo, my Priceline logo, even though it isn't. But we'll fake it for this one because I like Bill. All right, so I click Next. And now, because this is an iOS app, it asks me which application I'd like to choose, which device this is for, or I can make it available for both. I don't think I chose the iPad version, so I'll just leave it available for both in this one. I'm going to use this one anyway. Just wanted to go through the steps. So now I've created this application. My last step here is to deploy that application. And I already did that one, so sorry about that, misclick. I do need to refresh this window. And there I have my OneNote, and I'll manage the deployment. And at this point, I get to select who's going to receive this. Now, I want to point out a couple things about iOS managed apps that are kind of unique. One of them is when you go to deploy an iOS managed app, you will see that you not only have the users to select from, which if I were to deploy my Android app, you'd see I'd have users, but you will also have devices. If I were to select devices, only devices, then I would only be able to distribute this application as a required installation. So this trips people up sometimes, so I want to point it out. That in most cases, unless you want to do a required installation, that is, and that may be purely reasonable for these managed apps. You may want to say, I want these managed apps on everybody's device, so I'm going to do them as a required installation. And one good way to do that is I could just pick all mobile devices. And if I pick all mobile devices, and I add that, and I choose Next, my deployment action is not going to allow me to choose an available install. It will only allow me to choose a required install. So this is something that trips people up a bit sometimes in here, so I thought I'd point it out. I'm going to go back, though, and instead of a user group, I'm going to choose this restricted group, add them to it, and that's the users that will get this application. And I can choose now to either do a required install or an available install. And the available install is just puts it in the company portal so I can see it. I'm available to manage it. And here's the change with the managed app. Now, remember that managed app policy I created, we looked at least, created a while ago. I now assign that. And of course, I can have multiple different policies for different users, maybe more restrictive, less restrictive, depending who they are. And we select that policy. And we also have the ability to do this per app VPN that iOS supports. I don't have a VPN policy in this Intune instance, and I don't really want to use one for OneNote, so I'm not going to set up a VPN. But I could apply my per device VPN here if I wanted. Every time somebody opened Word, that we connected back into the environment through a VPN and made available to them shares that they had files stored on. So at the end of that, now I've gone ahead and I've set up Word, or excuse me, OneNote. I've already set up Word. Let me get back into my device here and set up my AirPlay working again. And there it is. Okay. So actually, let me. Screen's getting a little crowded, so let's get rid of a few of these things. There we go. That might be a little easier to see, hopefully. And I'm going to sign in to my company portal. Now, this is the one other important thing to understand about managed apps on iOS, particularly on iOS, which is why I wanted to do this on here, is that these applications, due to an iOS licensing policy are not able to be shown in the company portal. Oh, there I go, clicking on my iPad again. That works so well. I always end up trying to use the mouse when I do this. Let me demo these things. So there we go. Let's see if my 30 minutes has expired and I actually need to re-authenticate with my, yeah, here it comes. That's the call. I'll accept it and get passed in. So these applications, Apple has a requirement that no application that is in the App Store can distribute applications that are not in the App Store. So the way that we get around that is by using this app portal, which is at m.manage.microsoft.com. You sign in, and it gives me the same, a similar portal experience to the company portal itself. So I can still see all of my other devices. I can see applications. I can see featured applications. There's my OneNote and Word are both featured. I can install OneNote if I choose to install the app. It'll go ahead and do that. It's not as tied to the installation as you might think. It's going to go off and kind of do the installation in the background. It'll let us know. I'll get a pop-up here that the system wants to install the app, and I'll accept that. But again, I can see all of the things that I can normally do within the company portal, the native application company portal that we use on iOS. But for my managed applications, this is what I use. Microsoft is working with Apple, and they think they're going to have a better experience for this shortly. They'll be able to tie together the two company portals in a better way and allow us to have a slightly better experience. But these are the important things to understand when you set up these iOS managed apps, that you need to go to this web-based portal to install them. Other than that, everything works pretty much the same way. And this is not a consideration for Android. So you see I have my Word and Excel applications here. You see the OneNote application loading in the background. I also have Outlook installed. That's not yet a managed app. I fully expect that that will be very shortly. So let's go ahead and open up my Word application. I've already opened this to make sure it worked, and actually had to change my license to get that to function. You see this managed by your company. You can't see my screen over AirPlay because I haven't put the PIN in yet. So why don't I go ahead and enter that PIN. And there. Now that it's been unlocked, it'll go ahead and open up the document. So this is kind of a nice feature. Again, if your iPad's laying around, and you'll notice when I go out of the application and double-click, I'm not viewing the document anymore in here. Again, it's blocked by that managed by your company. So people don't get accidental access to that content. It's really well put together. So there's my application, my document. As I say, it's a simple document. I'm a simple person. And what we're going to do here is just go ahead and, not format mark, not header. We're just going to go ahead and hold. And I'll select all and copy it. Now if I go out to Excel, which I actually haven't set up, but we'll start Excel up. Should ask me for a PIN again. This will bring it under management. There it goes. Blanking out the screen for you and asking me for a PIN. We'll let Excel come up. There it is. I didn't, as I said, I didn't go through this all before, so it's going to ask me. There we go. And I'm just going to do that, do a blank workbook. And we'll see that we can paste in here. We'll see that we can paste in here, he said. There we go, paste. Well, it didn't come up, but it did allow me to paste. Now what I want to show is what happens when I work with a non-managed application, such as this Notes application, which is just Notes on the iPad, nothing special, right? But here's this I'm sorry about that. I left my phone on so I could hear it when I was MFAing, but I did not mean to leave it on for calls. So you see that now I don't have the ability to paste. Paste just doesn't show up in this window, even though I still have information in my paste buffer. If we go back to Word, you'll see, come on, Word. You'll see that I can paste there. But I can't paste in any other document. So by limiting the copy and paste, I've controlled the ability for these documents to leave my control, or this content to leave my control. So pretty useful functionality. As I said, a number of different applications available. You saw the policies that can be set for those different applications, and how we're able to restrict the user's use of that data on their device. And again, I'm clicking in the wrong spot. Now I'm back to a mouse. So I want to finish up by talking about conditional access. Conditional access is another overloaded term. As Steve pointed out at the beginning, I've been following around Microsoft for a long time, and Microsoft is very, very fond of overloading terms, and conditional access is, particularly in the Azure space, a little bit of an overloaded term. Microsoft is using conditional access to mean both the ability to do claims-based access at the authentication level, and also here in Intune to restrict access to cloud services and on-prem services. So this conditional access allows us to gate the access a user has on a given device to Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or an Exchange on-prem. So if a user, you can require that a user be enrolled in Intune to get access to Exchange ActiveSync on mobile devices. This doesn't affect RPC over HTTP, or what is known as Outlook Anywhere, and does not affect OA. Those can be managed separately. This is just for Exchange ActiveSync access, and also gates web access, I believe, as well. And the way this is done is there's a communication that goes on between Intune and either your on-prem system or the cloud that tells them what the state of your device is. And if your device falls out of compliance, again, jailbroken, rooted, or just doesn't have the correct policy set, then that device will be blocked from access to the service, whichever service you're using. I actually run my domain in a hybrid environment, and so what I had to do was install the Exchange connector on both my on-premise and also in the cloud to be able to manage those. The installation of the connection is done in admin under Microsoft Exchange. We either download the on-prem connector. The easiest thing to do is just to connect to this from a server you're using inside your organization that acts as an agent. It can't be put on a CAS, can't be put on a well, just can't be put on an Exchange box. You put it anywhere else. You can dial down the commandlets that are required for this. And the way this works is it uses the add block quarantine feature of Exchange, which has been around for quite a while, but manages that for you. You don't have to get in and deal with the families and device types and all those things that we've dealt with it with ABQ before, but it allows us to block that. The connector also gives us the ability to manage devices that are in Exchange and view those devices that are in Exchange. So you can see all of the devices. I've been working in mobility for a little while. You can see all the devices that I have that I've enrolled in Exchange over the past year, since the beginning of the year. number of devices that I've enrolled and unenrolled and re-enrolled and all those different things. And you can see that they're all tracked. But what's really nice about this is if you're going to do conditional access, you're probably moving people from Exchange ActiveSync over to Intune. And having this connection and being able to see these users, there are reports that will tell us who is being managed by Exchange ActiveSync, who's been moved over, and you can manage that transition from being EAS managed to being Intune managed when you have large numbers of users who are already using Exchange ActiveSync. So that's another feature of the Exchange connector. But the one we really wanted to look at was this conditional access for Exchange. So you see that I can have a number of different policies. I can have an online policy for Exchange, an on-prem policy, and a SharePoint online policy. So by default, what I do is turn it on. Say I want to block email apps from accessing Exchange Online if the device is non-compliant. And then I select the groups that I want to use to affect this. So which of the users in Intune do I want to make sure have conditional access applied so that if they're not enrolled, they don't get access to email. I have this group called Intune Licensing Group, which we looked at before. I'm going to go ahead and use that one for that. I can also select a group of users who, if they fall in this licensing group or whatever group or groups I choose up here, these users are exempted, right? That would normally be your C-level execs that we don't want to wait for their email. We'll let them go ahead and do it. And then I choose what do we do with unsupported platforms. So if someone tries to connect from their Amazon Fire or their Apple Watch, or which I guess I can't do, but say something like a Fire or an unsupported Android device that's a down-level Android device, we can choose whether just go ahead and allow them in or we want to block those devices. Normally what we would do is block those devices. It's a little bit different on the on-prem policy, not only because we use different groups. So you saw all the groups I had to pick from, which were all the groups that synced into Azure for the cloud, because of course they're available off on the cloud as well. But when I'm using the on-prem policy, I choose the groups, and these are groups that come from my Intune groups, which can be populated from groups from my propagated groups, or even a dynamic group if I wanted to. I can set those up, but I can do the same thing. I create a group of who this is going to apply to. I can choose a group that will be exempted if they're in that original group. And then here I can get even more complex because I have my own ActiveSync here. I'm not sharing it with everybody. So I can set up these families and models of devices which will be accepted from this. So this might again be a case where you have, maybe you've got some older Windows mobile devices that are on the factory floor. You want to allow those into Exchange ActiveSync without a problem because you can't do anything else with them. You could put those device types in here. They'd be allowed through. And then I have the choice for the default rule, and I can also customize the message that users receive. I wanted to do a demo of this, but there are a couple things that limited me in this time frame. I'd like to come back and do it at a later time when we're able to do it, but there's two things here. One is the time frame that Microsoft is checking compliance before it locks somebody out or allows them in is fairly long. We had a device last week that was sitting waiting to be denied access for 5 hours. So it's somewhere longer than 5 hours or 5 hours. But I know Microsoft is trying to shorten that, and they're watching performance as that happens, and they'll get it as short as they can, and that would make for a better demo experience, obviously. And the second process is that they found that although they provide a message, so when you do block somebody, they get a message, and if in their inbox. So if you've ever used AdBlock Quarantine Exchange, one of the downsides of it was it didn't give you any message on the device about what was going on. It would send a mail to your mailbox, but that mail wouldn't get delivered to the device that was blocked. Well, now what they do is allow that one message to come through on the device, which gives the users instructions on how to reset, how to get in compliance, and they're making changes to that. So I would expect those changes, as well as everything else, to be announced around Ignite, and we'll come back and do a broader look at this and the user experience and all of the pieces that go into it. But just be aware that that is changing a bit. Although it's fully functional now, it just requires the user. It's not as clear the steps that the users are taking, and I know they're redoing it. SharePoint Online, very similar to the Exchange Online process. I don't think we need to go through that. I did want to come back and just talk about a couple of other things, particularly where we are with SCCM and Intune. We've been through this period since, I think, since the December update of Intune, that SCCM has been lagging a bit behind Intune. We expect that Service Pack 2 will solve most of those issues and give us the ability to drive managed applications from System Center through Intune. Right now it's only available in the standalone. Also give us the ability to complete some other capabilities that we're lacking on the SCCM side. That should show up soon. Again, I would expect to, I know that there's been talk of it. I know Microsoft's already running it internally. There was a webinar where they talked about that. This will add some additional capability. We'll still have the 30 to 60-day lag from new features showing up in Intune until we get the extensions in SCCM. But we'll see a big jump in that in the next month, I think, and get a lot more functionality in SCCM, making it an easier choice to do a hybrid solution. So that's all I have for today. If there's any questions, I didn't see any show up. Well, I'm looking in the chat. I'm not actually looking at the questions. Still didn't see any in the questions. So, oh, wait. Oh, there it is.
Questions in there. Yep.
All right. Well, I can't get quite. There we go. We do have a few. So, Steve, did you answer some of these, or should we just go through them?
I think you should just go through them. I was looking at them and thought you might want to work backwards since you were just recently showing the Word
Sure.
Capabilities.
So do you need two copies of Word, one managed and one unmanaged? Well, if you wanted to use Word outside of the managed apps, then I believe that you might have some difficulty with that, because I don't think it's going to allow you to put two words on. That's a good question. I'm going to go back and look at that. I don't have a good answer for that. I assume, Mike, that we've got your email. We can follow up with you on that answer. Can you open a Word doc from your personal email without using a PIN if Word is managed? No. The idea is that you manage the items that are in that. Can you open it from a personal? I'm sorry. Yes, if we allow the paste in, then yes, you can open it from a personal mail. We can go. If we have time, I'll go back and open one from my mail. I'll have to look at what I'm opening before I do it, though. So how do you open a Word document personally? I'm use a PIN. I'm on-premise. Can I sync those to AD? And yes, you can sync additional attributes. That's also the ability to add attributes. And Mike, is there a preview facility? No, there's no preview facility, but if you just wait a moment, the group gets populated, and it's not like it takes over time to fill in. It happens pretty quickly. And will conditional access work for the mobile OA app? For mobile OA, is it using Exchange Active Sync? Wow. I don't know. The mobile, now the Outlook app, the former Accompli. I expect that Outlook app will be a managed app, because we don't have any way to do managed mail on Android yet, and I expect that the Outlook app will be the way to do that. So I think it will become a managed app. OA is managed. I'm sorry, Jordy says that OA is managed. So OWA is Outlook Web Access, which is just a web page, which really isn't managed. The mobile OWA app, which we used to have, was MOA. That was a very short-lived process, which was going to be the document, was going to be the managed application for these other devices. But after they've changed this, I'm sorry, I'm looking for a document to open in my mail. But Outlook is not a managed app yet. I've installed it as a managed app, and there's no management to it. You can call anything a managed app when you do the installation. It doesn't make it so. You have to wrap an application or build it enlightened with an SDK to make that happen. Can conditional access be configured to not require MFA while on company IP addresses, VPN, Wi-Fi? Yes. Yeah, so if you're using multi-factor authentication in the cloud, you can set up whitelisted IP addresses. The way I use it is on ADFS, and ADFS, using the claim rules, I'm able to determine whether a user is internal or external. And if they're internal, I don't require MFA. If they're external, I do require MFA. We've done that for a number of customers. It's actually pretty straightforward to build on ADFS. If you're using MFA in the cloud, then you have to gather all of your IP addresses, and I think you're limited to 24 ranges, I think. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, we're coming up against our time here, and I don't see any more questions. Steve, anything you wanted to add before we close out today?
Just remember, we've got more webinars coming up in May and June, and be on the lookout for announcements about our new curricula around MIM.
Yeah, and if you have a follow-up question or anything, want to touch base on any of this stuff, there's my email address. Feel free to contact me. I am in Europe next week, so mail will be a bit off time, but I'm happy to answer questions. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.